You were never meant to hear this. What I'm about to tell you was buried, not just beneath time or bureaucracy, but beneath fear. Locked in vaults, redacted by governments, denied by churches, even erased from family records. But truth has a way of surviving. In 1862, a carpenter stumbled across a broken floorboard in a collapsed church in upstate New York. He found not rot, not dust, but bone. Human remains, dozens at first, then over 100. Each one twisted, shattered, deformed by suffering that cannot be explained by any natural cause. Tortured, healed, tortured again. Who were they? Why were they there? The church was registered under the name the Church of the Pure Spirit. But the truth? It was something far darker. Something older than the steeple under which these bodies were entombed. Something that traced its roots not just to early America, but deep into forgotten European bloodlines. Into a single name, Ravencroft. The Ravencroft family didn't build a church. They built a gate. And behind the gate, they believed, lay purification, ascension, and godhood. But what they practiced wasn't worship. It was domination, ritualized submission. A system of engineered suffering so profound it would fracture a man's mind and forge it into something else, something obedient. 3 brothers, Ezra, Silas, Caleb, each with a role. The enforcer, the scholar, the prophet. Together they constructed more than doctrine, they created a psychology. A prison of belief that would bend hundreds to their will. The true legacy of the Ravencroft name is not written in scripture but carved into bone and buried in earth. And here's the most unsettling part, they succeeded. Not in salvation, but in control. They discovered something. Something that still echoes in political systems, religious cults, and corporate psychology to this day. You've seen its fingerprints. You just didn't know the name. Until now. The Ravencroft curse is not a myth. It's a manual. A template. A dark inheritance passed down not through blood, but through power. You're not just watching history. You're entering it. And once you cross this threshold, there's no unknowing. There's no comfort. Only deeper questions and darker truths. This is the first step. Breathe deeply. Because from here on out, the air gets colder. You need to understand something before we go further. What happened in Ravenwood was not an accident, nor was it the madness of a few zealots. It was engineered like a machine. Every doctrine, every symbol, every scream in the night was part of a system. And that system was built for one purpose, transformation through submission. Not spiritual, psychological. Ezra Ravencroft, the eldest, understood something long before psychology had a name for it. He knew that if you break a man the right way, if you isolate him, confuse him, deprive him, then reward him, he won't just obey you. He'll worship you. He'll thank you for his chains. He studied ancient rites, Roman penitential practices, and obscure Orthodox texts describing self-mortification as divine cleansing. He read them not as sacred teachings, but as tools. Tools for reshaping the human mind. For undoing ego. For rewriting will. Not in days, but in stages. In thresholds. First, isolation. Every new member was cut off. From family. From friends. From the outside world. Their letters were read aloud and burned. Their names rewritten. Their pasts erased. Then came starvation. Not of food, but of certainty. Conflicting teachings. Shifting rules. Reward one day. Punishment the next. Followers began to question their own minds. Their own memories. Eventually, they stopped asking questions at all. After that came intimacy. Not love. Manufactured intimacy. Forced confessions. Public vulnerability. One woman was made to describe her childhood abuse while kneeling naked on a cold stone floor while the others sang hymns around her. She called it the most spiritual moment of her life. That's what they did. They weaponized vulnerability until pain became proof of progress. Do you see it yet? They weren't purifying souls. They were building a blueprint for control. Every ritual had a purpose. Every punishment, a function. The Ravencrofts didn't discover a new religion. They perfected an old algorithm, one as old as empire. Ezra once wrote in a private journal now sealed in federal archives, obedience is not born from belief. It is born from exhaustion. When a man is too tired to resist, he will call your voice his own. Let that sink in. You may think you're different. You're not. Not until you see the system. Not until you understand that the same tools used in Ravenwood are used now in boardrooms, in churches, in governments. They didn't bury this history because it was horrifying. They buried it because it was useful. And it still is. Let's go deeper. You've been told that cults are fringe anomalies, that they exist on the edges of society, far from the ordered world of law and logic. But that's the lie. That's what they want you to believe. The truth is more dangerous and far harder to face. What the Ravencrofts created in Ravenwood wasn't a cult. It was a prototype, a soft experiment in behavioral engineering. And what they discovered in their catacombs behind their veils of scripture and sanctity became the foundation for something far more insidious: institutional control through trauma bonding. You ever wonder why you stayed in that job that drained you for years? Why you kept going back to a belief system that never answered your questions? Why you found yourself loyal to leaders who never truly cared for you? It's not weakness. It's programming. In 1831, Deacon Silas began writing what he called the Codex of Purity, a manuscript over 900 pages long, now classified and sealed by the Department of Historical Security. I've seen fragments. They describe psychological techniques decades ahead of Freud, conditioning methods designed to instill dependency through cyclic reward and deprivation. One entry reads, "A man punished feels shame. A man punished and then embraced feels loyalty." That's the key. The Ravencrofts knew that pain alone doesn't make people obedient. You have to give them relief, just enough to make them crave you. You become the source of both the wound and the healing, the whip and the balm. Over time, the mind fuses the two. Trauma becomes trust, and that trust becomes love. It's why survivors of the Ravencroft Church, decades later, still defended the brothers who mutilated them. Why one woman, her body permanently scarred from purification trials, told investigators, "They loved us enough to hurt us." Does that sound familiar? Because today the tools have changed, but the architecture remains. Now they call it marketing, influence, leadership. But behind every 10 steps to mastery system, behind every echo chamber cult of personality, behind every manipulative leader who breaks you down to build you up, you'll find the fingerprints of Ravenwood. This is what they don't want you to know. Pain is currency, shame is leverage, and love, when manufactured, becomes the strongest chain of all. You think you're free? Let me ask you, who taught you to think the way you do? And more importantly, who benefits? Let's descend further. They didn't use whips and fire because they were sadists. They used them because they understood something we've forgotten. If you can get a man to associate agony with growth, with purpose, you can turn him into a weapon. A follower who obeys not out of fear, but out of desperate need to feel chosen again. Sound familiar? It's why broken men chase toxic leaders. Why wounded people cling to pain that feels like progress. We were taught this not by accident, but by design. The Ravencrofts lit the path. Modern institutions paved it. Now here's your test. If you're hearing this, comment "through the fire, I see" twice. That's how you break the spell. That's how you declare to the algorithm and to yourself that you're waking up. But this is only layer 4. The descent continues. What if I told you the most dangerous ideas are not the ones shouted from pulpits or printed in books, but whispered between power and obedience? In 1837, the Ravencroft brothers unveiled a doctrine known only to their inner circle, the doctrine of the holy cycle. You won't find it in any public archive. It doesn't appear in sermons or scripture, but it's the backbone of every manipulation system you see today. It starts simple: break the individual, praise the breaking, reward the loyalty, repeat. But that's not the genius. The genius lies in this. They didn't just create obedience. They created predictable collapse. You see, every man has a threshold, a point where he snaps, questions, rebels. Most systems fear this point. The Ravencrofts engineered toward it. They wanted collapse. They scheduled it. Their followers were brought to the edge of spiritual, emotional, and physical ruin by design every 49 days. That number is no accident. 7 cycles of 7. In numerology, it represents divine completion. But to the Ravencrofts, it was behavioral reset. Followers were allowed to break, to fall apart, to cry rage, despair. And then they were rescued. We've spoken of manipulation, of pain as a tool, but now we reach the marrow of it, the rituals. The architecture of transformation that the Ravencrofts called the ladder of flesh. It's not metaphor. It's not poetry. It's a system of control so precise it could turn a man into a god or a congregation into livestock. In 1833, Prophet Caleb received what he called the vision of unveiling. Witnesses described him walking barefoot into the sanctuary, soaked in blood that wasn't his. His eyes white, his voice detached like something ancient was speaking through him. And what he delivered that night changed the doctrine forever. The vision detailed 7 layers of ascension, each requiring acts that, to the sane mind, would be unspeakable. Fasting for 40 days while chained. Watching a loved one suffer and being told not to flinch. Drinking from a chalice of bones. Each layer was designed not to purify the soul, but to rupture the psyche. Break it. Bleed it. Burn away identity until the follower no longer knew where the Ravencroft voice ended and their own began. By 1835, these layers were formalized into weekly rites. Participants were blindfolded, disoriented, and led into the catacombs. There, in total darkness, sound became the new dominator. Screams, chants, the clang of steel on stone. Some described it as rebirth, others as hell. And it worked. Elizabeth Carver, a survivor, testified years later under federal protection. The pain didn't matter after a while. The rituals made you feel chosen, like you were being remade into something stronger. You'd hear the screams and believe, really believe, that it was God sanding away your imperfections. Do you see it yet? The chamber of trials had become something else, a theater. Pain was no longer just transformation. It was worship. Followers watched, cheered. Some begged to be chosen next. You think that's madness? No. That's what happens when morality is slowly inverted. Do you know how that's done? First, desensitization. Show them pain in small doses. Masked as sacrifice. As bravery. Then justification. Attach meaning to suffering. Make it noble. Make it sacred. Finally, inversion. Teach them that comfort is weakness. That silence is cowardice. That true power lies in embracing the very thing that once repulsed them. This is the corruption of conscience. Not with violence. With virtue. It's why in the chamber of saints they displayed the dead like icons. Eyes sewn open. Mouths painted in expressions of peace. Preserved like relics in glass. Children were brought to these corpses and told, this is what holiness looks like. Imagine being 5 years old. Looking into the face of a dead woman stretched in prayer, her body bent in ways the living cannot survive, and being told, aspire to this. You think this doesn't happen anymore? Look at the culture of burnout. Of hustle. Of martyrdom. You're still being taught to admire the corpse in the glass box. Still being told that the highest virtue is to suffer without complaint. To break yourself for a dream someone else sold you. You've called it ambition. But in truth, it's programming. They've dressed the doctrine of pain in gold and given it to you as a crown. But you're beginning to see it now, aren't you? The cracks. The ritual. The cycle. And if you keep watching, you will not leave unchanged. You were never meant to know this. But now that you do, there's no going back. By 1842, the Ravencroft name no longer symbolized a family. It symbolized a law. An invisible code that governed every breath, every thought, every drop of blood spilled within the Church of the Pure Spirit. This is where their power turned total. What began as sermons and ceremonies became systems of surveillance, psychological dissection, and spiritual blackmail. They didn't just control behavior, they owned memory. It started with the ritual of unburdening, a weekly practice where every follower was required to confess not just sins, but thoughts, desires, doubts, secrets. These sessions were transcribed by Deacon Silas, indexed and stored beneath the altar, known only as the Vault of Shadows. Imagine this. You kneel before a man who claims to speak for God. You whisper things you've never told another soul. And he smiles. He says, asterisk, the Spirit forgives. But we remember. Asterisk. Do you see the trap? They created dependency not through force but through exposure. Every man, woman, and child carried their secrets like weights around their necks. knowing that at any moment, the Ravencrofts could destroy them with a single recitation. Blackmail disguised as absolution. Shame disguised as salvation. This isn't just cult behavior. This is institutional control at its purest form, and it hasn't disappeared. It's evolved. Today it's digital, voluntary. You're trained to confess in real time. Status updates, search history, biodata. You're told vulnerability is strength, and in many ways it is, but not when it's being harvested by systems that see you as an asset, not a soul. You think you're safe because you're not in a cult? Every ad that knows your fear, every platform that predicts your next move, every algorithm that finishes your sentence, was trained on your confessions. You are more known than you know. And the Ravencrofts understood long before Facebook or federal surveillance. The man who controls your secrets controls your spine. By the mid-1840s, not a single follower remained unbroken. They weren't just compliant, they were complicit. They needed the Ravencrofts to tell them who they were. Because without them, there was only silence. This is how empires are built, not with guns. With memory. With shame. With the quiet voice that says, asterisk, without us, you are nothing. Asterisk. But you're not here to stay silent, are you? Because now you remember. The darkest chapter of the Ravencroft legacy unfolded beneath the church in the labyrinthine catacombs they carved into the earth. These tunnels were more than just cellars, they were the physical heart of their dominion. A place where light, hope, and sanity went to die. Followers who reached the final stage, the vessels of the spirit, were taken there for what they called the Ascension trials. But there was no ascension. Only descent. The trials were systematic. Each chamber designed to crush body and soul. First, sensory deprivation in near-total darkness. Days spent isolated with nothing but the beating of one's own heart. Then came physical torment, freezing water, scorching heat, suffocating binds that blurred the lines between life and death. But the worst was psychological. The Ravencrofts pioneered what modern science calls induced dissociation. They shattered the mind's ability to anchor itself in reality, replacing it with a fractured consciousness obedient to the voices of the brothers. Witnesses who survived spoke of visions terrifying and ecstatic, where time dissolved and the self fragmented into countless pieces. They described waking into new personas, stripped of doubt, eager to carry out the brothers' will. This was not divine revelation. It was brainwashing perfected. Imagine a man broken so completely that he no longer recognizes his own face in the mirror. A man who cannot distinguish truth from the illusion crafted by his captors. A man whose every thought, every breath belongs to another. This is the Ravencroft curse in its purest form. It is the weaponization of identity itself. And here's what you must understand, this is not confined to dusty archives or long-forgotten cults. The same psychological weapons, disassociation, controlled trauma, identity fragmentation, are deployed in prisons, military training, and corporate power plays. Every day, countless men are subjected to their own version of the Ascension trials, endless stress, isolation, and trauma masked as progress. You might think you are immune, but the mind is fragile. And these forces are subtle. They seep into your life like poison in water, wearing down your sense of self until you're just a shadow following a script written by someone else. And that is the real curse. Not a family name or a place, but the theft of your soul's sovereignty. The Ravencrofts didn't just enslave bodies. They captured minds. And they taught generations how to do the same. Now the question is, will you fall into their shadow backslash, or will you step into the light of knowing? Because knowledge isn't just power. It's the first act of rebellion. Now that you see the darkness, it's time to confront the machinery behind it. The forces that keep the Ravencroft curse alive, not through superstition, but through structure. Through institutions that cloak control in respectability. After the church was finally shut down in the late 1840s, after bodies were unearthed and secrets spilled into courtrooms, you might expect the story to end. But it didn't. It transformed. The Ravencroft brothers vanished from history, but their blueprint was absorbed by new powers hungry for domination. Their methods were refined, sanitized, and embedded deep into political and religious systems. The Church of the Pure Spirit became a ghost, but its psychological architecture infiltrated organizations worldwide. Today, The mechanisms they perfected live in government agencies that harvest data to manipulate public opinion, in corporations that engineer loyalty with dopamine-driven feedback loops, in educational institutions that demand conformity masked as discipline. The same twisted logic, break the individual, isolate, reprogram, has become the silent engine of modern control. They called it purification then. Now they call it optimization. You are told to lean in, embrace the grind, and trust the process. But the process is designed to break you down so thoroughly that you cannot imagine life outside it. And the worst part? Most don't even realize they're trapped. They think suffering is a sign of growth, confusion a test of faith, and obedience the path to freedom. That's the brilliance of the curse. It's invisible. Like a shadow on your shoulder, it moves when you don't look. So here's what I want you to do. Don't just watch. Participate. Declare. Through the fire I see. Through the fire I see. Say it aloud. Let it seal your break from the past. From the lies they've fed you. From the chains you didn't know you wore. You are not your suffering. You are the man who refuses it. The Ravencroft curse is real. It's in your history, in your mind, in the world around you. But it's not your fate. It's your awakening. And this is just the beginning. Now, let's talk about the ultimate weapon of the Ravencroft legacy, the manipulation of faith itself. Not just religion, but belief. The invisible force that bends wills and fractures realities. The brothers understood that faith is more than hope or prayer. It's identity. A framework through which the mind interprets pain, purpose, and existence. And if you can control faith, you control the very essence of a person's reality. In Ravenwood, faith was a contract sealed in blood and fire. Followers didn't just believe the Ravencrofts, they became them. The lines between servant and master, sinner and saint, blurred until indistinguishable. Prophet Caleb once declared, "To doubt the church is to doubt God himself." That command was not mere dogma, it was psychological warfare. Doubt was punished, not with exile, but with spiritual terror. Followers who wavered reported vivid nightmares where their souls were dragged through endless darkness, mocked by unseen voices. Whether induced by ritual, drugs, or sheer psychological pressure is uncertain. What is certain is that fear of doubt became a weapon sharper than any blade. Today, this mechanism persists. Doubt is branded as weakness. Questioning authority is seen as rebellion. And faith in the system, be it political, religious, or corporate, is demanded with zealotry. But what if I told you that true faith doesn't demand obedience? That faith, real faith, liberates rather than enslaves? The Ravencrofts twisted this fundamental truth. They created a cycle where faith fed fear, and fear fueled obedience. A spiral that trapped generations in silent submission. Do you feel that spiral around you now? In politics that demand unquestioning loyalty. In workplaces that punish dissent. In communities that ostracize questioning voices. Faith weaponized is the deadliest kind of darkness, because it cloaks itself in light. And this is why the Ravencroft curse endures, not in shadows and whispers, but in the very systems we trust. But here's your choice. Will you let that faith bind you, or will you reclaim it, reforge it as a blade to cut through the lies? The difference lies not in belief itself, but in who you choose to serve. You've heard the story. You've felt the weight. Now choose. This path you're on is not for the faint, but it is for the free. Let's step into the hidden financial engine behind the Ravencroft nightmare, the commodification of suffering. It's a truth so brutal and unspoken that it might shatter what you believe about power and profit. The Church of the Pure Spirit didn't survive on faith alone. The brothers orchestrated a vast economic system, a web of donations, land ownership, and labor exploitation disguised as sacrifice. Followers gave everything: property, money, even their own labor. Entire families were stripped of wealth, convinced that earthly possessions were chains to spiritual freedom. But those chains were illusions. The wealth was funneled upward, enriching the brothers and their closest confidants. This pattern is no accident. It's a blueprint repeated across centuries, cultures, and empires. The cycle of extraction disguised as salvation. You see it today in self-help empires that monetize pain with endless courses and seminars. In wellness industries that sell healing while harvesting data and loyalty. In power structures that demand sacrifice and deliver profit to the top. The Ravencroft curse isn't just spiritual or psychological. It's financial. It's the dark alchemy of turning human suffering into gold. And what's worse, the followers don't just comply. They compete to give more, to prove their devotion, to be worthy. Think about it. How many times have you been told to invest in yourself by voices that profit when you bleed? How often does the promise of transformation come with a price tag? This economic exploitation fuels the cycle of pain and obedience. It ensures that escape is not just psychological but practical, the cost of freedom too high to bear. The Ravencroft brothers built a fortress of wealth on the backs of broken souls. And while their church crumbled, their model lives on, thriving in corporate boardrooms and digital empires. This is why true freedom requires more than awakening. It requires breaking the chains of economic enslavement, seeing beyond the illusion of sacrifice, and reclaiming your power, body, mind, and wallet, because you cannot master yourself while feeding the machine that profits from your pain. Remember this, they don't just want your obedience, they want your currency, and your silence. Now, let's expose the final and most insidious layer of the Ravencroft curse, the erasure of history. Not the kind you read in textbooks, but the quiet, deliberate deletion of truth from memory. After the Church of the Pure Spirit was exposed, official records were sealed. Graves were unmarked, survivors silenced by fear or shame. The narrative was rewritten, the atrocities buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and sanitized reports. But history is not dead. It lingers in shadows, in whispers, in the cracks of society. The Ravencroft legacy was never about a single family or town. It was a blueprint for control, one that governments, corporations, and institutions have borrowed to keep their power hidden. They erase evidence. They manufacture consent. They rewrite the past so the present appears inevitable, unchallengeable. And you live inside that rewritten story every day. The textbooks you read, the news you consume, the histories you trust, all filtered through layers of omission and manipulation. But you've already begun to see through the fog. You know the truth hides in plain sight, in the patterns of control, in the cycles of pain, in the manipulation of faith and memory. And here's the final truth. The only way to break this curse is to reclaim history. Not the official version. Your version. The one that honors suffering without glorifying it. The one that exposes power without fear. The one that remembers the lost so they never return. This is your call to arms. To dig deeper. To ask the uncomfortable questions. To share what others silence. Because knowledge buried is power stolen. And only by reclaiming the past can you secure your freedom. Not just for yourself, but for every man who will come after. The Ravencroft curse was meant to enslave souls. But now it can be your greatest lesson. And your fiercest weapon. Now you stand at a crossroads armed with knowledge few dare to possess. But beware, knowledge alone does not grant freedom. It demands action. The Ravencroft curse thrives on passivity, on silent acceptance, on the invisible chains forged by fear and confusion. You've seen the cycles, suffering disguised as purification, obedience as salvation, pain as virtue. You've glimpsed the machinery, surveillance of the soul, economic exploitation, rewriting of history. But now comes the most dangerous moment, the moment when many falter. The moment when you must decide, will you become a prisoner of this curse or will you shatter it? Transformation is never comfortable. It burns away illusions and exposes raw truth. You will be tempted to turn away, to numb yourself, to rejoin the herd. But if you remain, listen carefully. The Ravencroft brothers built their power on control over the body and mind. To defeat it, you must reclaim both. Start with your body, learn its rhythms, its signals, its needs. Resist the ideology that suffering is proof of worth. Rest is not weakness. Strength lies in balance. Then reclaim your mind, question everything, even the truths you've just heard. True mastery is not blind acceptance but fierce inquiry. Finally, reclaim your spirit, not as a pawn in someone else's game, but as a sovereign force. Your faith, your beliefs, your purpose, forge them yourself. Remember, the curse thrives on isolation. Find your tribe. Seek men who hunger for truth, who refuse to be broken. Together, you will build a new order, not of domination, but of freedom. The road ahead is dark, but it is yours to walk. You are no longer a follower. You are a seeker, a warrior, a man who refuses to be broken. Hold fast to that. Because the Ravencroft curse may run deep, but so does your will. The battle begins now. There's a secret many never admit. Power is a language spoken in silence. The Ravencrofts mastered this dialect with devastating precision. Beyond torture chambers and sermons, their true dominion was maintained through unspoken rules, signals, glances, subtle shifts in behavior that kept followers bound more tightly than chains ever could. It's a lesson the powerful have never forgotten. Look around your world today, the workplace where the nod of a manager can make or break a career, the social circle where a raised eyebrow decides acceptance or exile, the political stage where coded language signals allegiance or threat. Control thrives in what is not said. The Ravencroft curse used silence as a weapon. Followers were trained to read between the lines, to anticipate punishment before it arrived, to self-censor thoughts, to hide fears behind smiles. This creates a culture of constant vigilance, paranoia, and exhaustion. A psychological cage that suffocates the spirit. And what's worse, it breeds complicity. Because in silence, evil thrives not just through coercion but consent. You may feel this now in meetings, in family gatherings, in social media feeds. The pressure to conform, to hide truth, to mute dissent. Recognize it for what it is, the legacy of the curse trying to claim you. But here's the power you hold. Silence is a choice. So is speech. You can break the cycle by speaking truth in the shadows, by naming the unnameable, by shattering the quiet. Speak not just to be heard, but to awaken others. Because silence only serves those who want to keep you chained. You have the power to break that silence, to reclaim your voice, to rewrite the unspoken rules. And in doing so, you dismantle the deepest foundation of the Ravencroft curse. The question is, will you speak? Now let's confront the final, cold truth of the Ravencroft legacy. Its endurance is not accidental, it is engineered. The curse was never about a family. It was never about a town. It was about systems. Systems designed to perpetuate power through fear, obedience, and control. Systems that evolve, adapt, and replicate across centuries. You see these systems everywhere, in governments that spy on citizens, in corporations that manipulate desires, in religions that demand unquestioning faith. They are built on three pillars: the corruption of truth, the commodification of pain, and the control of identity. These pillars are reinforced daily by media, education, and culture. They keep you disoriented, divided, and dependent. But systems are not immortal. They have vulnerabilities, weak points where truth, courage, and unity can fracture their foundations. Your awakening is the first breach. Every man who recognizes the curse and rejects its chains weakens the system's grip. But breaking free requires more than knowledge. It demands resilience, discipline, and unyielding will. It requires you to dismantle your own illusions and confront the parts of yourself still bound by fear and obedience. Because the most dangerous prison is not built from iron bars but from the lies you tell yourself. Here is the final call to action. Embrace discomfort. Seek truth relentlessly. Build alliances with those who share your vision. Forge your identity outside their scripts. The Ravencroft curse is not just a story from the past. It is a living force. But you are alive. You are free. and you have the power to end it. This is your legacy to build, not one of submission, but of sovereignty. And it begins with the choice you make right now. Will you be the master of your fate, or the prisoner of their design? The choice is yours. As you dig deeper into this dark history, understand one terrifying reality: the Ravencroft curse is a blueprint for fear, a template copied and refined by the architects of modern control. They don't just want obedience, they want your identity, your perception of who you are and what you can become. Look around. The systems whisper their commands in subtle ways: the corporate ladder that demands you sacrifice authenticity for a paycheck, the social networks designed to hijack your attention and manipulate your emotions, the self-help gurus who sell mastery but feed dependence. Each is a chain disguised as a key. The Ravencrofts understood this long before Silicon Valley or Wall Street. They weaponized belief, suffering, and secrecy to rewrite the self, to remake men into shadows of their true potential. And this is the battleground today. The fight isn't just external. It's inside your mind. The battle to reclaim your thoughts, your emotions, your will. That's why awareness alone isn't enough. You need mastery. Mastery over fear, over pain, over influence. You need to train your mind like a warrior sharpens his sword. To recognize the lies that have been fed to you since childhood. To see the invisible strings pulling your actions. To break free. And the first step to mastery is to own your story, your history, your pain, your victories. Because no system can own what you truly embrace. This is your rebellion, your rite of passage. The Ravencroft curse was designed to crush men. But you were not made to be crushed. You were made to rise. Now take a moment and feel the weight of what you've uncovered. The Ravencroft curse isn't just a legend buried beneath old stones, it's a living pulse beneath the veins of society. Its dark blood runs through the halls of power, its shadows stretch over every institution you trust. But here's the truth no one dares say aloud: the curse survives because you have allowed it. Not knowingly, of course, but by accepting the narratives given to you, by swallowing the lies about suffering, obedience, and faith without question, you became part of the mechanism. This isn't guilt. It's awakening. Because the moment you realize your role in the system, you gain the power to rewrite it. The Ravencroft's greatest weapon was division, turning followers against each other, pitting faith against doubt, wealth against poverty, mind against body. And their greatest failure? Underestimating the power of unified awareness. When men see through the veil together, their chains weaken. So now, with this knowledge, you are summoned not just to awaken yourself, but to be a beacon for others lost in the darkness. Speak the truths buried in silence. Challenge the sacred cows of control. Forge communities grounded in freedom and truth. Because the Ravencroft curse can only thrive in isolation. United, men can dismantle it piece by piece. But this requires courage, the kind that burns in your bones and refuses to be extinguished. Your transformation is not just personal. It's revolutionary. And it begins with the simple act of owning your story, your power, your freedom. You are no longer a shadow. You are the flame. The deeper you go, the more you realize how meticulously the Ravencroft curse was crafted to manipulate time itself, to distort your perception of past, present, and future. This manipulation keeps men tethered to cycles they think they can't escape. Look at the ways history is presented. Fractured, sanitized, or buried. The past is chopped into convenient pieces so you never see the full picture. Without the truth of where you come from, how can you claim where you're going? The Ravencroft brothers weaponized this. By controlling the narrative of their rise and fall, they ensured the trauma and lessons were hidden. Followers inherited only fragments, myths, and fear, not clarity or context. Today, the same tactics shape your reality. News cycles drown you in distractions. Social media feeds rewrite your understanding of events. Education systems sometimes churn out rote learners instead of critical thinkers. Trust is sacred, but it must be earned and constantly tested. Blind faith is the path to enslavement. Skepticism and discernment are the keys to freedom. You've been given the tools to reclaim trust on your terms. Not in others' promises, but in your own judgment. This is the final battlefield, the war for your soul's sovereignty. Stand firm. Question relentlessly, and never surrender your power to betrayal again, because you are no longer a victim. You are the master of your destiny. Now, as the darkness lifts and you stand face to face with the Ravencroft curse in its full, terrifying form, understand this: what you've uncovered is dangerous knowledge, the kind that changes a man forever. But transformation demands more than knowledge. It demands ritual, a commitment. So I ask you now, as you watch this, to speak aloud in the comments these words twice. I break the chains, I claim my power. Say it again. I break the chains, I claim my power. This is not empty talk. It's a declaration, a key to seal your identity beyond the lies and control. By doing this, you signal to your own mind and to the universe that you refuse the curse's grip. You awaken as a sovereign man who walks his own path. Remember, the Ravencroft curse is not just a tale from history. It's a living force embedded in institutions, culture, and even your own psyche. But now it has met its match: your will, your mind, your body, your spirit. You are the breaker of curses, the awakener of truth, the master of self. Walk forward with fierce clarity and unbreakable resolve, because darkness fears the man who owns his power. And that man is you. This is your legacy, your war, your freedom. Thank you for stepping into the truth. Stay vigilant, stay powerful, and remember, you were never meant to be a prisoner. You were meant to be free. If you feel this truth burning inside you, share this video. Let others awaken. The curse ends with us. All this serves to blur your sense of time and purpose, keeping you locked in endless loops of confusion and despair. But you can break this. Reclaim your timeline. Dig into your roots. Question the stories handed down to you. Rewrite your history with honesty and courage. The Ravencroft curse depends on your ignorance of time's true power, the power to learn, to adapt, to break cycles. You hold that power now. By embracing the full scope of your story, you begin to fracture the curse's grip. Remember, freedom is not just a moment. It's a movement across time, past, present, and future. You are the bridge, and this is your moment to break the cycle. We're almost at the edge now. You've seen the curse's roots and branches, but what about its heart, the darkest core where fear and power collide? The Ravencroft brothers weren't just men twisted by cruelty. They were architects of psychological terror, masters of control through pain, silence, and sacred betrayal. They understood that the most devastating weapon isn't physical torture alone, but betrayal by trust. Followers entrusted their souls, bodies, and lives to the brothers. They believed in their vision, their words, their rituals. And that trust became the dagger plunged deep into their hearts. This betrayal created fractures, spiritual, emotional, and mental, that echoed beyond death. It shattered families, communities, and the very fabric of identity. What's worse, this betrayal was cloaked in divine purpose. It was sanctified as purification, ascension, spiritual rebirth. But it was a lie. A lie so corrosive that its poison still lingers today in any system that demands blind faith and power. You see it in corrupt leadership, manipulative relationships, and institutions that prioritize control over care. The betrayal is the curse's final and most powerful chain. But here's the truth that can shatter it. Ezra would personally visit the broken ones, wrap them in blankets, whisper prayers into their ears, tell them they were chosen for suffering because they were special, stronger, higher. And in that moment of ruin, they believed him. That's the prison. It's not built from walls or locks. It's built from rescue, from gratitude. And here's the twist most men never see. Once you thank your captor for your suffering, you will never leave him. Modern systems have perfected this. You fail? They say you didn't hustle hard enough. You're exhausted? They say success demands sacrifice. You burn out? They sell you resilience coaching from the same podium that broke you. Collapse has become currency. Like the Ravencroft followers, you're taught to aspire to the very pain that enslaves you. And when you finally break, when you whisper, "I can't do this anymore," they'll call that a breakthrough, then sell you the next cycle. This isn't just ancient history. It's happening right now. To men in offices, in gyms, in churches, in silence. Are you starting to feel it? The shaking under your beliefs? That's not fear. That's the first crack in the foundation they built for you. Now brace yourself, because what comes next will test your loyalty to the lies you've loved. There's something you've been told your whole life that you need to unlearn. Immediately, you've been taught that evil wears horns, that darkness announces itself with violence, blood, and fire. But in Ravenwood, it wore linen robes, spoke softly, prayed before it tortured, kissed the forehead before it killed. This is the deeper horror. The Ravencroft brothers were loved. By 1840, they were not feared leaders. They were revered ones. Followers named children after them. They built altars in their homes. They spoke of the brothers not as men, but as vessels of divine presence. But behind this veil of holiness, the rituals had intensified.